Hey guys, what's up? Alright, I'm gonna try not to make this too long, just sharing some of my thoughts that I wrote a few days ago. And yeah, sorry about my nasally voice. I have some crazy allergy issues going on right now. Thank you, Georgia. But anywho, what I wrote about was loneliness, and I think this is something that's universally felt at some point to some degree. So hopefully you guys can relate to these thoughts, and yeah, hopefully enjoy it. So here we go. Let loneliness become your best friend. I promise it's worth it. Well, that's a strange way to begin a post. Seriously though, I think you have to have a bit of free time in order to experience like chronic or profound loneliness. I think you have to subject yourself to a decent amount of time where you are quiet and or still long enough to hear your own thoughts. Then the loneliness, that panging emptiness, that hollowness of being only with yourself, it starts to really well up. I've definitely experienced this since moving away from my family home nearly 3 years ago, and I know plenty of other people have or will experience this throughout their life. And sometimes it creeps in. It's more, just rearing its head and taunting you with what you can't have, and other times it smacks you in the face like a ton of bricks, and it leaves your emotional floodgates teetering on the brink of collapse. As fallible and occasionally fragile human beings, though, isn't it inevitable? And if it is, then we better find a way to cope with it that is healthy and efficient. So far, I have not become a master defender against loneliness, or really a master of anything for that matter, but I have learned how to better manage the loneliness and the associated feelings when they arise. And I think that comes from getting to know it. Yes, getting to know loneliness. I think that anything we reject or resist only persists. So, therefore, the only way to really conquer something negative or counterproductive is to accept it, to welcome it. By creating this ease in your relationship to it, you release some of the power that it had over you, or better yet, you take back the power that you released to it. In my theory, this is the initial necessary exchange in the process of moving past your loneliness. If we can't completely eliminate it, then we must at least enable ourselves to move to a place beyond it. So we accept it. We acknowledge it. We acknowledge that it exists. We acknowledge that it's valid. We also acknowledge that even if it's valid, that does not equate to it gaining control over us. And that we are the experiencer of this feeling, and because of that, it's not really possible to be lonely. Loneliness is something that we're experiencing, but we don't have to continue to experience it. Perhaps asking why you're feeling this way is the best way to get to the root of the quote-unquote problem. Surely there are times when you're doing tasks or activities solo and you're not bothered by it. Now, granted, in these times, you may have simply distracted yourself, as we often do in this day and age, actively placing your focus on an object as a temporary escape. But the internalization that needs or wants to take place is not possible if we maintain this superficially stimulated state. So in those times, it's when we need to readjust and when we need to get uncomfortable, unfortunately. I think we need to take pause. We need to remove the distractions and, for lack of better words, deal with our shit. Ask, why am I feeling lonely right now? Is it possible that our discomfort isn't due to the company that is not present, but rather the company that is? Is it possible that our perceived loneliness is a product of our discontentment with ourselves? chances are not a day goes by that you don't interact with a handful of people. I mean, many of us have groups of friends or family or even acquaintances, and their absence should not automatically induce the sadness that's associated with loneliness. I mean, shouldn't we be able to endure periods of peaceful solitude instead of the isolation and even anxiety that often ensues? I think yes. So at the root, we're uncomfortable in some way or another with ourselves. That aforementioned hollowness, it doesn't seem like a void because we're truly missing a necessary part of us. Perhaps that hole is actually a part of us that we are trying not to see. But what if we could feel whole, W-H-O-L-E, instead of the ache of that familiar hole, H-O-L-E? A lot of intelligent people have said that everything we need is already inside of us. So let's just go ahead and trust them. So then that means that we don't just have some vacant space formerly occupied by another being. I mean, how strange would that be anyway? What we have is more accurately like a rejection of self, or an attempted displacement of self. I mean, we are entirely full organisms. We are teeming with energy and thoughts and emotions and attachments. The only thing that in fact is lacking is our willingness to take ownership of all of that. Our past experiences and certain associations have caused us to repress what we don't see as valuable or pleasant to the world. So we foolishly try to make the ugly disappear as if it would just become invisible to the world. It's like we are wishing ourselves away, and yet we wonder why we end up feeling so alone. Honestly, I believe that what we refer to as loneliness is so often misconstrued, and it then takes a further detour when we try to fill that hole that in reality was never abandoned, nor a hole in the first place. What if getting to know loneliness was really just deep introspection? What if we could make loneliness our best and less annoying friend by realizing that we are created whole, and therefore we need not ever be lonely? If we are able to authentically confront the entirety of who we are, then loneliness as we know it shouldn't plague us like it does. You see, it's a self-ignorance that was causing us to feel incomplete all along. Now we may actually be able to enjoy the peace of our solitary moments. So in conclusion, by sitting with loneliness, we were able to make a new friend. And it turns out it's the only person we will be spending the rest of our lives with. Alright friends, those are my thoughts for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Love you guys.